The last time I felt this way, I'd watched The Day After Tomorrow. Remember those DVD players? I managed to get my hands on one. And I lay in bed watching The Day After Tomorrow at the beginning of a really, really intense cold snap. And I scared myself silly and woke up with thoughts that weren't entirely sensible all over my head. This time, there's no getting away from them. We're actually living the disaster movie right now. From a Muslim perspective, I guess I like to think, the way that the world had gone on us was so rotten and twisted and ruthless and corrupt, and all the racism and the prejudice and the hate. I look on it as Allah's way of fixing it, of reminding us to care about each other and reminding us we're interdependent. Some of us, he'll call some of us home, and the rest of us will wake up as better people in a better world. That's my way of seeing it, and I would advise you to try and see it the same way. It just gets a bit less daunting like that. I suppose isolation is really scary. It's not scary for me. I thought you should have all been doing it for years because it's actually the best possible way to live. But then maybe you aren't a lifelong recluse like me. It's even daunting to me. I don't know how to wrap my head around it. Like sex workers, you're really lucky because I can't think of another category of workers that actually has a multi-million-dollar industry set up just to protect and rescue them. If only we could find a way of persuading that industry to understand that we can't live in and upon the fresh air indefinitely, we'd be way ahead. But I give up. I've tried all weekend. They're not interested. None of them are you've got all these big anti-sex worker people, these big in-demand people, and they're all promoting transgender hate and sex worker hate and sex biodemonization, very expensive sex biodemonization in one case. And they just aren't interested, Oh yeah, this is what I was going to tell you, is what made me think. Our Taoiseach, known better to us sometimes as our gay overlord, said something very wise this evening. He's a bit sensible at the moment compared to usual because he actually is a medical doctor, so most of his family. He said, whatever you do, don't listen to questionable sources, wherever you find them in the media, online. Just listen to the official sources. So I'm going to tell you, in terms of Ireland, ignore Ruhama. Absolute load of rubbish coming out of them. Nothing of the slightest help to you. Just go to Welfare IE and look at the provisions for self-employed people. They mean you. Don't worry about it. Square it later. As long as you haven't got kids, have the bottle, stand up and say, yeah, I was a sex worker. I can't work. What of it, if you have to, right? You're entitled to that money. I think we all know, it's been a gradual process for me too. First I went from wondering how people would manage all the hand washing to starting to think, oh my God, they're closing the schools. But there must be women who are being stranded in different countries to their kids, and their kids aren't in school, and baby minders and people next door will only put up with so much. And then I started to realize what we were all gradually realizing, which is that apart from all direct contact is going to have to shut down. It'll shut itself down whether we shut it down or not. I'm not judging anyone at all. It will shut itself down, same way as everything else. I don't know about you, but as this has unraveled, my feelings about things have changed dramatically from minute to minute to minute. And I think that most people aren't going to want to do anything. Now, you have the right to any provision self-employed people are entitled to. You don't have to go through any of these organisations. They're not offering you anything anyway. I can only speak for Ireland. I'm seeing there's an awful lot of initiatives going on. There's plenty in the US and the UK, Scotland, I mean, you know your own local organisations, but most of these organisations have at least some kind of disaster fund set up. But you're going to have to go to statutory services. You're going to have to be ready to stand up for something that I've known all along. Now, in case you haven't noticed, I kind of came back to myself when I picked up my Islam again, and obviously sex work has no part to play in my life. You know, it's not part of something that I would normally even think about, except for one little thing. Sex work is the only reason I survived several years of my life. There was no other option. And while I was there, obviously, it's like every other catastrophe. You know, you've got normal life in between the moments of crisis. There's an awful lot of normal life going on, and you have to occupy your thoughts. And I occupied my thoughts with noticing that sex workers were just ordinary people, like no better or no worse than they choose to be. You know, if you're a scumbag, you don't get a free pass for being a sex worker. But two of the most extraordinarily decent human beings I've met in recent years are both active sex workers. You know, I mean, there are a lot of extraordinary decent, more than two, by the way. There's just two I'm thinking of absolutely in particular that are just unbelievable. They basically live their lives for other people. And, you know, you're as good as anybody else. You're as good as you've chosen to be. You're as good as your own personal integrity. That if you believe a thing is right, then you can't believe anything else. You cannot hold. I wish I could let me indoctrinate some aunties in this. Actually, I can't indoctrinate you to live by my belief system. That's ridiculous. You haven't got the checks and monitors inside your head. You know, it won't work. But also, a very important thing about Islam is whatever is a sexual sin, the biggest sin of all, is to decide that somebody died and made you God. It's called shirk, and it's really, 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 really super bad. It's a pity they couldn't just introduce that little part into radical feminism, really, isn't it? But anyway, you've got to stand up and you've got to fight for these things. Not as like big, it's not a political gesture. You're not making a point. You're having to get through to the world what you and I have known all along, that you're just another person, you have the same rights as anybody else and the same needs as anybody else. And I'm afraid the time is now. You know, we can't pause this one. We can't do anything about it. So, you know, I'll keep finding as much information as I possibly can. Don't follow things the way I do. The only reason I can do it is because I spent so much time having to follow the sex work issue for my own protection, and also, frankly, having to follow the situation in Syria through some of the worst human crises I've ever seen. There's not so much online now as there used to be, but, you know, I'm used to it. I have my own ways of coping. You don't. Look away, look to your kids, look to whoever you've got on Skype and WhatsApp. WhatsApp and Skype, great things. I'm sending my mother emails with recommending anything I can think of that I actually delete from all my devices and actively hide from. I reckon will make it easier for her if they put them all under house arrest. Well, that's what it is in the UK. I'm sorry, call it what you like. It's house arrest. But, you know, do whatever you can to stay sane. Totally produce content. And just remember something, incidentally. I shouldn't really be encouraging you to. I'm just saying produce content. I'm not saying produce naughty content. But if you are producing content, just remember you're producing that content for people who are also going half out of their minds in isolation. And there may be something you can put into that makes their life easier. I don't know, it's up to you, but it's another challenge to follow through with. It's another thing to focus on. It's another way to feel a sense of entitlement to get you through this, you know? Be good to each other, stay online, have fun, laugh at this. Not laughing at this won't make it one tiny little bit better. I promise you, if you don't see the fun in it, you're going nowhere, you know? Please take care of yourselves. Please fight for your right to be a human being amongst other human beings. That's all I've ever wanted for any of you. That's when my job's over, when you have that status. May Allah be with all of you, whether you believe in him or not. Doesn't matter, as long as you're a decent person. I personally think that, you'll get waved through anyway. Take care now.